Good evening, everybody. I'm Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Gualtieri, and with me is St. Petersburg Police Chief Anthony Holloway. This is an officer-involved shooting involving a St. Petersburg Police Department officer. As I think you all know by now, we have a deadly force task force here in Pinellas County, and that's why the Sheriff's Office is conducting this investigation, because it involves the use of deadly force by a St. Petersburg officer. And again, the members of the task force are the Pinellas Park Police Department, Clearwater Police Department, and the Sheriff's Office, and St. Pete when they're not involved. So I'm going to run through for you what happened here this evening, and what I'm going to tell you is very preliminary. It is all subject to change. We're going to provide as much information as we can with what we know at the moment, and it's based on preliminary statements and preliminary witness interviews. So again, we're putting it all out as we know it, but it could well change as the investigation unfolds. So tonight at about 8:50 p.m., the St. Petersburg Police Department received a call about a black male who was in the area of 22nd Avenue South and 34th Street. He was armed with a gun, and he was walking in the area. The reports were that he was on 22nd Avenue South and around the intersection of 34th Street moving to the east. Other callers had also said that they saw the male matching the same description in the area of 18th Avenue South to the west of 34th Street, and some of those callers said that he had actually discharged the firearm in the neighborhood. So multiple calls, male with a firearm. He had fired the gun, and the officers who were involved in this, one of the officers, Christian Collins, who is a new St. Petersburg police officer. He's a new recruit with prior experience from the Philadelphia Police Department. In fact, he's about 3 days into his field training here at the St. Petersburg Police Department. But again, he's an experienced officer, and his field training officer, Officer Fred Jackson, were south of the intersection here on 34th Street. So as they're coming northbound in a marked cruiser, they saw this person who we have identified as Tory Barber. First name is Tory, last name is Barber, Barber. Yet he's a black male. His date of birth is 7/11/99, which puts him at 21 years old. We have a variety of addresses for Barber, and as far as we know right now, he's transient, and we're trying to find out if he has a permanent address. One of the things that we do know about Barber is that he has mental health issues. We know that from prior Baker acts and contact that the St. Petersburg Police Department had with him. So as Officer Collins and Officer Jackson are northbound on 34th Street, they see Barber, and again, he's in the intersection and is walking east on 22nd Avenue South from 34th Street. As they pull up to the intersection, Barber turns around, goes a little bit back to the west and then north. Just north of the intersection of 22nd Avenue South, there's a bus stop sign. At that point, they saw that he had the firearm in his hand, and Officer Collins is driving, the recruit, and Officer Jackson, the FTO, was on the passenger side. Officer Jackson confronted and challenged Barber and told him to drop the gun. He didn't, and Officer Jackson got out of his cruiser and again confronted him. At that point, Barber began running northbound. Officer Collins, who was driving, followed Jackson, chasing after him because he was armed. Barber ran north here on 34th Street and into the parking lot here behind me at 2140 34th Street South. You can see this entrance is over my left shoulder over here, which would be on the west side of the parking lot. As Officer Collins is chasing Barber, he runs into the parking lot, so he's running north, he runs to the east, and then makes a button hook to the south and is running. And you'll see the cruiser in the parking lot behind me there that's facing south. That's the cruiser that Officer Collins was operating. And Barber continued running, and he got up by the bushes. As Officer Collins got near where Jackson was, he saw Jackson take the firearm, and he pointed the firearm at him. So he came up like this, at what we would call a low-ready gun, as he came up with the firearm. The firearm is on the ground there. It's a semi-automatic. It looks like to me like it's probably a 9mm, and it looks like it has an extended magazine on it. So at that point, because he was being drawn down on, is Officer Collins fired from inside the vehicle. The window was down on the passenger side. Officer Collins fired outside the vehicle and struck Barber. Barber was struck in the arm, upper body area. The injuries that he received are not life-threatening. He was taken to the hospital, but again, he has non-life-threatening injuries. Again, the investigation now is ongoing. That's what we know at this point. And we have detectives here that are conducting interviews and speaking to witnesses, and there was a number of officer witnesses and citizen witnesses to the incident. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, but that's what we know at the moment.
Sheriff, any idea of how long this man was?
Hang on a second.
Officer Collins driving the vehicle?
Officer,
He
yes.
was the one who eventually fired the shot?
Correct. Officer Collins was driving, and Officer Jackson got out, okay, at the bus stop on 34th Street. And as Barber continued to run north, is that Officer Collins left Officer Jackson on the sidewalk and chased after the suspect. Yeah, Trevor, go ahead.
The suspect, how long had he been walking around? Any idea where he was coming from or where he was going to?
Sure, we're trying to flush all that out now, but from the calls that St. Petersburg Police Department received, is that from what I know right now, it sounds very much like he had been in the area for a while. We have at least 2 calls from 2 citizens who live in the area that don't know each other, that are distinct, that saw him walking around here with a gun and saw him shooting. One of the citizens, and again we're flushing this out now, says that she has video of him with a gun shooting, but this is a neighborhood up off 18th Avenue South. So it looks like he was wandering around out here with a gun and he had fired the gun. Now how long he had been doing it and how many times he fired, that's all something that we're going to have to flush out during the investigation. Again, this is really one of those unfortunate situations as it seems at first blush, because it sounds like he's got some serious mental health issues.
Any priors?
He does have some priors for domestic violence. Again, we're preliminarily looking at his background, but he does have some prior arrests.
Sheriff, there was a loud car when you were demonstrating where he was holding the gun. Could you go through that one more time?
Right. So according to Officer Collins, is he pulls into the parking lot here again. So as you're pulling into the parking lot off 34th Street, you're going to the east. Is that he immediately button hooks to the south. As he's going to the south, he gets to where the cruiser's parked, and Barber is standing there up on the curb, and the passenger side window is down as the officer is facing south. He sees Barber come up with a firearm at what we would call really a ready position with a firearm. And he comes up with a firearm at a ready position and is pointed at Officer Collins. And at that point, from inside the car is when Officer Collins fired. He believes he fired 2 or 3 times, again striking Barber in the upper body area and struck him in the arm, shoulder area.
So did the officer fire through the passenger window
Yes.
that was down from the driver's side?
Yes, from the driver's side, he fired through the passenger side window that was down. Yes.
The kind of weapon the suspect had?
Again, it's a semi-automatic. Looks like to me probably a 9mm. It looks like to me like it has an extended magazine on it. It's in the grass area up there. It's in some leaves. I tried to get some photographs of it so I could show you the photographs so that we could put it out, but the photographs are not coming out real well because it's in the leaves. So I saw it. As soon as we can get some good photos, we'll make sure we put those out so that you have it. But right now, you just can't get good photos. We're going to have to let the forensics people process it, and then we'll get you some photos of it.
Were they able to easily arrest him after he got shot, or was there still resistance?
So there was about 4 or 5 other officers here, and they immediately went up after he was shot and went down. They immediately took him into custody, and there was no resistance to that point. He was shot, so he was incapacitated and went down.
The suspect's gun never fired, to your knowledge?
No, it did fire, according to the witnesses. It didn't fire here necessarily, but again, not positive of that because there's witnesses. I can tell you that Officer Collins says is that he didn't see or hear the suspect fire, so there's no gunshots. And the reason why he fired, and it appears now, rightfully so, is because the bad guy came up, so Barber comes up at low ready gun and points the gun at him. And at that point, he did what he had to do to protect himself.
Where's the investigation come from here? As far as the task?
So a lot of witnesses to interview, let forensics, crime scene process. We're looking at all the body-worn camera, dash camera, etc. See what that shows. So there's a lot of video evidence. Of course, we'll canvass the neighborhood. All these businesses in here, or a lot of these businesses in here, appear to have video. So witness interviews, body-worn cameras, dash cameras, video, civilian witnesses, and then really want to find out what he was doing out here in the neighborhoods, and if he was out there shooting. And hopefully there's no other victims of anything out here. So there's a lot of work to be done yet, and we'll be out here all night working on it.
How long do you think 34th is going to be closed up?
For a while, probably the next few hours at least.
What do charges look like for him?
Well, at least, okay, and again, we're going to flush this out, at least it would be aggravated assault with a firearm on a law enforcement officer. That's the minimum that it would be. But again, very preliminary in the investigation.
And could you spell his name for us, please?
Sure. It's Tory, T-O-R-Y.
It's
His last
actually
name.
EY, sir.
Which
Sorry,
it-
we just got a correction there.
Okay, so T-O-R-E-Y, Tory, and his last name is Barber, B-A-R-B-E-R. Again, his date of birth is 7/11/99.
Chief, during the investigation, what happens to the officers? Is it a standard kind of like administrative paid leave, or what happens during the investigation?
So it's standard, he'll be put on administrative leave until the investigation is concluded.
Thank you.
And Barber hasn't been charged yet, right? He's just in the hospital for right now.
Well, he's charged. I mean, he's not going anywhere. Okay, so I mean, consider him charged. I mean, at least with aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer. And again, we're going to find out from these citizen witnesses when he was seen shooting over here in the neighborhoods and whatever else we can uncover. So, but yeah, at a minimum, he's under arrest for aggravated assault with a firearm at a minimum.
So both officers' standard procedure would be paid administrative leave, sir?
The only officer that will be put on paid administrative leave is the officer that fired the rounds. The other officer will go back to work tomorrow.
Thanks, sir.
And Collins is the officer who just started a few days ago?
That is correct.
Okay, gotcha. And what was his background again? You said he came from Philadelphia, and so is it just that these are his first couple days out on the road, or are these his first couple days with the department?
He has prior experience from Philadelphia, and this is his first days out on the road here in St. Pete patrolling the streets.
Third day.
Third day.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, anybody else got anything else for me or Chief Holloway?
Thank you, Sheriff.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank
Yep.
you.
All right.